The dare was meant to be the joke. I understood that going in. The point was that she would say no, or I would lose my nerve, or something would go awkwardly enough that the table would have something to talk about for the rest of the night. That was the structure of it. I was the setup. She was the punchline they hadn't asked permission to use. What nobody at that table had accounted for was that she said yes. My name is James Callahan. I was 29, a structural editor at a mid-size publishing house. The person who reads manuscripts not for the story, but for the architecture underneath it, whether the thing that was built holds the weight of what it's trying to carry. It was a job that required a particular kind of attention, the kind that looks past the surface to find where the load-bearing walls are, and I had gotten good at it in ways that had nothing to do with books. I had been working at Meridian Press for 3 years, long enough to know which editors had taste and which had instinct, which was not always the same set of people, long enough to know the rhythms of the building, which floor had the better coffee, which conference rooms were booked decoratively rather than functionally, which colleagues read what they said they were going to read, and which ones bluffed with confidence. Long enough to know that the company holiday party was the kind of event you attended because your absence would be noted and stayed at for exactly the amount of time required to make your presence unremarkable. I had not been going to do anything unusual at this one. The relationship I had been in for 3 years ended around the time I started at Meridian, which is the kind of timing that feels significant and is probably coincidence. Alicia and I had been good together, then fine together, then politely distant together, in the progression that happens when two people who started well find out they want different things and spend 1.5 years being too careful about each other's feelings to say so. When we finally named it, there was relief on both sides, which told you something. Relief is not the right feeling for an ending, unless the thing that's ending was already over. After that, I had not been particularly interested in trying again. Not bitterly. That is not how I am built. I am not a person who metabolizes things into anger. I metabolize them into patience, which sounds like a virtue and is sometimes a flaw. I had grown patient about a great many things and called it equanimity, and what it actually was, by the time of the party, was a form of waiting so practiced I had stopped noticing I was doing it. I was the only one at the table that night not in a relationship. This had been true for going on 2 years, and I had reached a reasonable peace with it, in the specific way you make peace with something by not examining it too directly. Her name was Nora Vance. She was a foreign rights coordinator, a different department, a different floor, a person I had been aware of in the peripheral way you are aware of people who occupy the same building without occupying the same orbit. She was quiet in the specific way of someone who has made a deliberate choice to be, rather than someone who doesn't have anything to say. I had noticed her at a few all-hands meetings, sitting at the edge of a row, reading something while people found their seats, looking up at exactly the moment the meeting started, and not before. She wore her hair pinned up most days, always one piece that came down by afternoon. She had a way of listening to people that made you understand she was actually listening, not waiting. I had not spoken to her once in 3 years of working in the same building. That was not unusual. It was a 4-floor building with 60 employees, but I had noticed the not speaking. And what I mean by that is, I had thought about correcting it, and had not, and that particular kind of not doing is its own category of thing. The party itself was at a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of room that is slightly too large for the number of people in it, which creates an echo of ambition the crowd can never quite fill. The DJ played songs you recognized without being glad to. The centerpieces were tall enough that you had to lean sideways to see who was across from you, which most people stopped bothering with by the second course. The bar had a line that moved slowly because 2 of the 3 bartenders appeared to be navigating a dispute they were managing professionally, but not invisibly. My department had claimed a table near the back, which tells you everything about how my department felt about company events. There were 6 of us. The dare happened because Marcus, from contracts, had been watching her across the room and decided the table needed entertainment. "James," he said, with the specific tone of someone who has already committed to the bit, "bet you won't ask the quiet girl to dance." I looked at him, then I looked across the room. She was sitting at a table near the far wall, alone, at the moment. Not conspicuously alone, not someone who had been abandoned there, more like someone who had found a pocket of quiet in a loud room and settled into it. She had a glass of wine, and she was looking at something on her phone, and her expression was the expression of someone who was in no distress about any of this. "Why would that be a bet?" I said. "Because she's going to say no," said Tyler, from editorial, who was on his third drink and had become very interested in the theory of what other people would do. "And if she doesn't?" Marcus spread his hands. "Then you're a better man than we thought." I sat with this for a moment. The table was watching me with the comfortable attention of people who expect to be entertained. The DJ had moved from something up-tempo to something slower. And I thought about a lot of things in the space of about 4 seconds. About the way the dare was framed, about the word quiet and what Marcus meant by it, about the fact that I had been aware of her for 3 years and had not spoken to her, and about the specific kind of person who sits at the edge of a room and looks up at exactly the right moment. I stood up. "Don't embarrass yourself," Tyler said, in the tone of someone who thought that was a distinct possibility. "I'll try not to," I said, and I walked across the room. She looked up when I was about 6 feet away, not startled, more like someone who had been aware of my approach before I'd committed to it. She had dark eyes and an expression that was calm without being closed, and she looked at me with the slight attention of someone deciding whether to engage. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she said. "I'm James. I work on the 3rd floor. Structural editing." "I know who you are," she said. Not unkindly, just directly. She set her phone face down on the table. "Nora." "I know," I said. "Foreign rights." She nodded once. "So we've established we know who each other are." "We have," I said. "Which makes what I'm about to ask slightly less strange." She waited. Not impatiently, just waiting. The way she listened at meetings, with her full attention and no performance around it. "Would you like to dance?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment, not evaluating, thinking. There was a difference and I could see it. Then she said, "Was this a dare?" I could have lied. It would have been the obvious move. But something about the directness of the question made lying feel like the wrong tool. "Yes," I said. "But I was going to come over anyway." She looked at me again. Longer this time. "That's a strange thing to admit," she said. "It's true," I said. "I can give you the context if you want it, or we can just dance." One corner of her mouth moved, very slightly, not a full smile, something quieter, more considered. She stood up. "Let's just dance," she said. We danced to a song I could not have told you the name of then, and cannot tell you now. What I can tell you is that she danced the way she did everything else, with her full attention, without self-consciousness, as though being in a ballroom at a company party was exactly as ordinary as sitting at a desk. She did not perform enjoyment. She just was there. That was what I noticed most. She was entirely present in a room full of people who were partially somewhere else. "What's the context?" she said. We were about a minute into it. "My table dared me," I said, "because they thought you'd say no." "Why did they think I'd say no?" "Because you seemed," I looked for the right word, "unapproachable." She considered this. "And you disagreed." "I thought you seemed like someone who'd made a choice," I said. "Not someone who couldn't be approached." She was quiet for a moment. The song moved around us. At the table across the room I was aware, in the peripheral way, of 6 people who had expected a different outcome watching us dance. "What kind of choice?" she said. "To not waste energy performing comfort you don't feel," I said. "In a room you don't need to perform for." She looked at me. It was a specific look. The kind that means someone has said the thing you'd given up expecting someone to say. "That's very observant," she said. "For someone I've never spoken to." "I pay attention," I said. "It's most of my job." "And outside your job?" "Outside my job too," I said. "Apparently." She looked at me again with the expression of someone who has just changed their assessment of something. Not dramatically, quietly. Like a reading that's come back different from what you expected and you're deciding what to do with the new information. The song ended. We did not immediately separate. "The context," she said, "was better than I expected." "What did you expect?" "That it would be embarrassing and you'd apologize for it," she said. "Most people, when they've done something they shouldn't, lead with the apology." "I hadn't done anything yet," I said. "No," she said. "You hadn't." She looked at me for a long moment with her dark, steady eyes. "Would you like to sit down?" she said. "Not at your table." We found 2 chairs near the edge of the room, away from the centerpieces and the DJ, and the table of people from my department who were now watching us with the slightly stunned attention of people whose joke has become a different kind of story. Good, I thought. Let them watch. We talked for 2 hours. That is not an exaggeration and it is not a romantic embellishment. It was 2 hours and 12 minutes, and I know because she checked the time at some point near the end and said quietly, "It's late," with the tone of someone who has been genuinely surprised by time passing. I learned things about her in those 2 hours that I had not been able to observe from 3 floors up. She had grown up in 4 different cities because her father was a translator, and the work moved, and she had a specific relationship to being the new person in a room. Not afraid of it, not immune to it, just practiced at it in the way that teaches you which parts of yourself to keep and which to adapt. She had studied comparative literature and spoken 3 languages with conversational fluency and was working on a 4th, which was Japanese, which she said she was learning badly but with commitment. She asked me about the structural editing, not the polite version of asking, but the real version, what it actually felt like to read something and be the person who decided whether it worked or not, whether the bones were sound. I told her about a manuscript I'd been working on that week, about the particular problem of a story that was emotionally true but architecturally unsound, where the feeling was right, but the structure couldn't carry it. That happens with people too, she said. More often than with books, I said. She smiled at that. The full one, this time. It went all the way, and I had the feeling that she didn't give it easily, which made it mean something. "What are you paying attention to right now?" she said. She asked it the way she asked most things, directly, as though the question were obvious. I looked at her. The edge of the room, the party noise around us, her hair with one piece down by now, her glass empty, her eyes steady on mine. "You," I said. "Mostly." She nodded once, like this was the correct answer to a question she'd been turning over. "Your table is still watching," she said. "I know. Are you bothered by that?" "No," I said. "Are you?" She looked across the room at them, briefly, without self-consciousness. Then she looked back at me. "Let me ask you something," she said. "Yes." The dare. She turned her glass in her hands. "You said you were going to come over anyway." "Yes." "When did you decide that?" I thought about it honestly. "When Marcus said the quiet girl," I said, "not because I was offended on your behalf, you can take care of yourself, but because the way he said it meant he had already decided you were a certain kind of person. And I didn't think that was right." She was still. "What kind of person did you think I was?" "I didn't know," I said. "That was the point. 3 years in the same building and I didn't know, and that was my fault more than yours." I paused. I thought it was time to find out. She looked at me for a long moment. The party was winding down around us. People were finding their coats. The DJ was playing something nobody was dancing to anymore. 3 years, she said. 3 years. And tonight was when you decided. Tonight someone gave me a reason to stop deciding not to. I said. There it was. Not what I'd planned to say. But true. The way things are when you stop curating them. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I notice things too. I know, I said. I've noticed you, she said. For a while. She said it with the directness she brought to everything. No performance, no hedging. Just the thing, stated plainly. Something in my chest went very still. Why didn't you? I started. Because you seemed like someone who needed to come to his own conclusions, she said. And I don't do things for people they could do for themselves. I looked at her. The ballroom was mostly empty now. The lights had come up slightly, the way they do at the end of events to tell you it's over. That is the most reasonable and most frustrating thing anyone has ever said to me, I said. I know, she said, and there was the smile again, the full one, easy now, like something had been decided, and the deciding had been the hard part, and the rest was just what came next. My table was putting on their coats when I came back for my jacket. All 6 of them looked at me with the expressions of people who had sent someone on an errand and gotten back something they hadn't ordered. Well? Marcus said. Well, what? I said. What happened? I picked up my jacket. We talked for 2 hours, I said. We're getting dinner on Thursday. The table was quiet for a moment. Tyler set down his drink. She said yes, he said. To the dance and to Thursday, I said. Yes. Marcus looked at me, then across the room to where Nora was getting her coat from the coat check, and then back at me. He had the expression of someone whose joke had turned into a lesson and he wasn't sure yet what he'd learned. Huh, he said. Yeah, I said. I put on my jacket. Good night, Marcus. I should tell you about Thursday, and about the weeks after, because the party was just the beginning, and beginnings without middles are just stories about nerve. I drove home from the party thinking about what she'd said. I've been noticing you for a while. I thought about 3 years in the same building, 3 years of all-hands meetings and the edge of the room, and one piece of hair down by afternoon. 3 years of me being aware of her and not crossing the 12 feet that would have required, and her apparently being aware of me and waiting for me to cross it because she did not do things for people that they could do for themselves. That was a very specific piece of information. I sat with it in my kitchen for an hour before I went to sleep. On Monday, she sent me an email. It was about the restaurant she wanted for Thursday. 2 sentences, a name, a neighborhood, asking if Thursday still worked. I said yes. She said she'd make the reservation. That was the whole email. No performance around it. Just the logistics of a thing already decided. Thursday came. Dinner was at a small Japanese place she suggested, which made me laugh given what she'd told me about the language learning. She explained that eating at a restaurant was not the same as speaking the language, but that the menu gave her practice with the characters, which she demonstrated by reading the specials to me badly, but with commitment. I told her the commitment was more interesting than the accuracy. She said that was true of most things, and looked at me in the way that meant she was including something unsaid in the sentence. We talked for 4 hours. We closed the restaurant in the particular way you close a place without meaning to, when you look up and the lights are slightly different and the staff is doing the end-of-night things and you have completely lost track of the fact that there is a world outside the table. She noticed before I did. She always noticed things before I did, not because she was more perceptive, but because she was paying attention to more things at once. I paid attention deeply. She paid attention broadly. I understood somewhere around the 3rd hour, almost perfectly complementary in this, the way 2 different approaches to the same problem can solve for each other. I walked her home. It took longer than it should have because we kept stopping. A window display she had an opinion about, a building she had a question about, a bookshop still lit past 10 that neither of us had been in before, and both had reasons to be interested in. I told her about a debut novel I'd worked on that year, a writer who had taken 4 years to understand the structure, and then written the whole thing in 8 months once the bones were right. She listened the way she listened to everything, and then she said, "The bones have to come first. The rest is just filling them out." "That's exactly what I said to the writer," I said. "Then she was lucky she had you," she said. Not as a compliment. As a fact. She stated things as facts. I was already learning to receive them that way. At her door, she turned to me and said, "Same time next week?" "Yes," I said. "Good," she said. And that was all. It has been 18 months. We do not live in the same building anymore. We live in a different one, together, which required merging 2 apartments worth of books, which took a full weekend, and 2 arguments about whether thematic or alphabetical organization was the mark of a serious person. She won the first argument. I won the second. We compromised on the 3rd set of shelves, and I think we were both right. She still sits at the edge of rooms. She still looks up at exactly the right moment. She still pays attention to more things at once than I do, and notices things I miss, and I notice things she passes over, and we have spent 18 months trading what we see. She is learning Japanese with commitment and improving slowly, which she has decided is sufficient. I have learned to pay attention broadly, which is harder than it sounds when you're built for depth, but she has been patient with me about it. The dare was meant to be the joke. I understood that going in. The table thought they were setting up a story where I walked back embarrassed and Nora was the punchline and everyone laughed and ordered another round. What nobody at that table had thought through was that she said yes, and that she'd been noticing me for 3 years. And that the dare gave me a reason to stop deciding not to walk across the room, which was the only thing that had been in the way. Marcus, to his credit, apologized at the next all hands. Not about the dare specifically, about the word he'd used, the quiet girl. He didn't say what he'd learned from it. He didn't need to. The table had watched 2 hours of it from across the room. Nora, when I told her, said simply, "He was right that I was quiet. He meant it differently," I said. "I know," she said, "but it's not an insult. I'm quiet because I'm paying attention." She looked at me. "Some people find that intimidating." "Some people," I said. She smiled. "The full one. The easy one. The one I get now because I went across the room." "You weren't one of them?" she said. "No," I said. "I wasn't." "What would you have done if someone dared you to ask the quiet person to dance, and they said yes, and then they told you they'd been noticing you for 3 years? And have you ever realized that the person you'd been too cautious to approach had been waiting just as long as you had? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.